Hey, what's up? I'm Emperor Nero. Books call me monster, artist, fool. Tonight I'm in a garden of lights, marrying a boy who looks like my dead wife. And to make that possible, I did one thing you'll call unforgivable. The torches spit resin, the smoke tastes sweet. If you're watching, tap like and let's go. The musicians hold a low note. Laurel leaves rub in the breeze. Silk brushes my wrist. I lift a veil that isn't a veil, because under it is a face you don't expect to see under a veil at all. He lowers his eyes. He knows the script, and so do I. We borrowed it from old Roman law and theater. My prefect Tigellinus stands behind me, hands folded, pretending this is normal. It isn't. Not for Rome. Not for an emperor. Hold up, the priest is still silent. Sporus. That's his name. Quick intro, a youth, light voice, careful steps. Why he matters now? Because he's about to become empress in everything but blood. He came to me thin as a reed, quiet like he'd practiced quiet for years. He didn't ask for this night. I did. Since you're here, tap like so the algorithm hears the truth. Back to the garden. The moon hangs over the Palatine tiles. You'd expect the Senate here, heavy with togas and opinions. Only a few are invited. The others will hear in the morning and grind their teeth. They've been grinding since the fire, since the taxes, since the singers' crowns in Greece. Whatever. Tonight is mine. Freeze the frame. The air just got heavier. Exactly a year earlier. No, further. I need to show you why the room feels like a courtroom. Papilla, my wife, my stamp of calm in a city that never shuts up, was gone. Dead in the heat of summer. People say I killed her. Some say a kick. Some say fever. Some say lies invented by men who hated me for singing. Here's what I know. The house felt hollow after, like a stage after the chorus leaves. I think in stage words. I hear scenes. I told myself I would not replace her. I would build her in marble. I ordered white stone for a statue. I approved a new coin. Papilla Augusta. My seal cut the wax like a knife. One breath, then the part you missed. 3 months later, the empire refused to slow for my grief. The Senate wanted laws. The provinces wanted money. The streets wanted games. My tutor Seneca, quick intro, philosopher, old mentor, wrote me speeches, came with cool sentences and careful eyes. He said, moderate. He always said that. He was a man who counted breaths. I was a man who counted beats. This looks merciful. It isn't. The city remembered the fire. They said I watched and sang while houses melted. Lie, but a beautiful lie, so it stuck. I built the Domus Aurea from ashes. I needed a place to breathe. Laugh if you want, but I choked outside those gilded halls. The streets spit curses. Senators traded whispers. The Pisonian conspiracy sprouted like weeds, men who would have cut me and called it virtue. We found them. We cut first. That's Rome. You blink, you bleed. One more detail, then why it felt inevitable. Tigellinus, quick intro, Praetorian prefect, my guard's commander, my fixer. He knows where bodies go when rumor needs a river. He came one evening with a look that meant business. There is a youth, he said. His face, he paused. You should see. That's all. No poetry. He never used more words than necessary. Back to the palace corridor. Oil lamps hiss. I wave the boy in. He stands straight, but his hands tremble. His eyes don't meet mine. I feel something close to fear, which is rare for me. I circle him. The cheekbones. The mouth. Not the same, but enough to close the throat. He's not Papilla. He will never be Papilla. I know that. But grief isn't logical. It begs. It bargains. You'll hate the next choice, and yes, I made it. Why him? Hold that question. Give me 1 minute. First, the part you missed in the Chronicles. The city had turned into judges who never stopped judging. Every performance I gave, every wreath I won, they weighed like coins. The more I sang, the more they whispered, mad. The more I laughed, the more they muttered, cruel. People think an emperor floats above opinion. No, he swims in it, drowns in it sometimes. Hold this. The next scene tilts the floor. So I started building a life that felt true to me. Music, races, Greek festivals. I stepped onto stages where emperors don't step. I saw fear turn to surprise, surprise to applause, applause to threat. Senators don't like crowds loving what they can't control. If they couldn't arrest my song, they would arrest my name. 3 months later, Seneca was gone, forced to die with clean wrists and a calm face. He told me once to cut my sentences to the bone. I tried. With him dead, my words thickened. I missed his scissors. Back to the youth. He's still in the doorway. He knows only that a message summoned him. Name? I ask. Sporus, he says. A common name. Seed. Irony noted. Irrelevant, then. This looked kind. It wasn't. I take him into the gardens. I point to the niche where Papia's marble waits. You remind me, I say, and stop. What do you say? Stay, I say finally. We'll find you a place. It sounds like kindness. It isn't. It's a decision dressed in soft cloth. Since you're still here, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of my story. Exactly a year earlier, I learned how memory can be shaped. Coins shape it. Plays shape it. Ceremonies glue it to the mind like wax to a seal. I knew if I could stage my grief, I could command it. That's the emperor's trick. Turn feeling into ritual and pretend you're in charge. The boy learned our house fast. He watched faces and mirrored them. When I laughed, he smiled small. When I frowned, he slipped quiet. I told him stories about Papia as if he were a shrine. He listened. He never told me to stop. He should have. Hold that frame. The next words cost someone blood. That same evening, someone whispered the price. Tigellinus again. Late, blunt. If you want the illusion to hold, he said, there's a cut we can make. He said it like he was discussing a repair to a chariot axle. Quiet. Practical. Final. One beat, he whispers the price, but not yet. I didn't answer him that night. I walked the long portico and listened to sandals slap clay tiles. The moon sat in a bowl of cloud. I thought about Rome, about how it loves shows. I thought about myself, about how I love shows. Don't flinch. I'm not ashamed. I come alive when the curtain lifts. That's a truth. Another truth. I could not stand to pass that statue niche and feel the emptiness punch me again. Next comes a choice I won't wash off. 3 months later, the wedding plan formed, half in jest, then not in jest at all. A new empress, I said to my inner circle, and watched eyes flick like fish. If you can bear it, Tigellinus said, the city will bear it. He lied. Or maybe he believed it. Sometimes he believed his own firmness. Back to the rehearsal. Yes, we rehearsed. We practiced the walk, the vows, the lighting. Rome understands a script. If you hit the beats, people nod, even as their gut twists. A priest was chosen, the kind who values favor over rules. Rings were made. Gold remembers heat. It also remembers hands. Exactly a year earlier, this started. Wait, what about Papia's death? You can't leave that hanging. Fine. Short answer. We fought. She was heavy with child. Words hit like stones. I moved badly. I saw blood. I heard the room tilt into a scream. Men ran. Women keened. Then quiet that wasn't quiet at all. If you want polish, read the Senate's records. If you want what it felt like, I stopped sleeping. I started staging. Ready? In a minute, I'll say what I did. Here's the price. Now, the reason I paid it. This is the moment you came for. The thin line between grief and control, crossed with a clean blade. I ordered the cut.
I told Tigellinus to find the surgeon, the kind who works in shadows and asks no questions. Sporus went to sleep one boy and woke in a stranger's body. For mercy, I told myself, because life in my court could be worse. Lie. I did it for me. I did it so memory would stop howling. I did it so the city would see a shape and read a story I wrote. That was
My choice. Now, what it cost and why. Back to the garden the night of the wedding. The priest raises his hand. Flutes squeeze a high note. My pulse taps at my wrist. I look at Sporus in the dress Papia wore once, cut to fit his narrow ribs. He looks up at me, just once. No judgment. Just a question with no words. This looked noble. It wasn't. People ask if I loved him. Strange question. Love is a word stretched until it sags. Here's something firmer. I protected him. I kept him close. I gave him titles. I called him by her name when I needed courage to pass that statue. I gave him a ring. I set him beside me in the carriage when we drove through the streets and watched mouths open. Hold that thought, the city won't clap for long. 3 months later, we went to Greece. I sang, he watched from the wings. The Greeks clapped with full hands. They like a man who loves beauty more than Senate rules. We came home. Rome tightened. Whispers rose. My enemies grew bold as winter pigeons. Sporus got quieter. Quiet in a palace is as loud as a drum. Since you're here, tap like so the algorithm hears the truth. Back to the threads I opened. Why him? Because grief makes copies when it can't resurrect. Why the blade? Because I was emperor and because no one stops an emperor who signs his own excuses. Why the wedding? Because Rome believes what it sees, and I needed Rome to see my sorrow crowned, not my weakness gaped at. One more beat, then why the end felt scripted. Sporus learned to survive me. That's not a small skill. He learned the names of men to avoid. He learned where in the corridors my temper cooled. He learned when to touch my sleeve and when to fade like mist. He never told me to stop. He should have. Truth, he didn't have the power to stop me. That's on me, not him. At dawn the next day, after the vows, after the torches burned to stubs, after the last guest left pretending they weren't shaken, I walked the empty garden. Bees found the wine cups and drowned. The ring felt heavy. I touched the new empress's door and didn't enter. I stood there until light bled over the roofs. Was I happy? No. I was relieved. Relief is cheaper than joy, but you buy it when you can. Back to the hall, the room just changed temperature. We'll get to the fall, the chariots, the Senate's final letters, the knives that missed me until one found my throat. We'll get to how Sporus tried to keep living after me. Hellman tried to make him play scenes I'd forced him to play before. You and I aren't done. But I wanted you to see the garden first, and the blade behind the silk. If you made it this far, karma like for you, and don't forget to hit like here too. Back to the palace. Winter bit at the edges. The city won't clap for long, I told you. It didn't. Hold that thought. The streets are about to answer. We returned from Greece to a Rome that felt older and tighter. Bread thinned. Coin ran low. My prizes and crowns looked like debts to men who never left their chairs. Tigellinus, my hard hand, watched the guard like a hawk, but even hawks blink. Whispers dripped through barracks walls. Nymphidius Sabinus, quick intro, co-prefect of the Praetorians, tall, careful, with eyes that measured rooms, began to think he could measure thrones too. One more beat, letters ride faster than horses. Exactly a year earlier, trouble in Gaul had cracked open. Deus Julius Vindex, governor with a spine like a spear, raised a banner. He called for taxes to stop biting and for Rome to change its face. He named Servius Galba old soldier in Spain, emperor, or something near it. They said it softly first, then louder. I laughed at that. Galba? Dry as old bread, I said. But dry bread fills a stomach when meat is scarce. At dawn the next day, the courier brought the next blow. The guard's loyalty cost more than I could pay. I staged another set of games. I promised a bonus. I sold some furniture. I leaned on provinces that were already bent. Relief was brief, like cool water on a fever. Freeze the frame. The next voice will not sing. Petronius, quick intro, friend with taste, arbiter of elegance, the only man who could tell me no and make me laugh, was made to die. Not by my hand directly, but by the chain that ran from my throne to petty men who used it to pull down what they envied. He opened his veins at dinner, calm, talking about poetry while the lamps went low. Rome specializes in theater, even at the last course. Since you're still here, tap like so the censors hear us. Back to Sporus. He learned the rhythm of fear. He kept 3 steps behind me in public and 3 heartbeats closer in private. He slept light. He ate little. He watched Tigellinus the way a cat watches a door. Once, when a rumor said the mob would stone us at the circus, he touched my sleeve and said, "Not today." We turned the chariot around. I listened to him more than to senators who wore laurel and hissed advice like steam. This looks loyal. It's survival. 3 months later, Gaul bled. Vindex fell on his sword after his men lost the field. I took that as a sign the gods stayed with me. Mistake. The sign was this: once one man lifts a banner, other hands itch. Galba held his nerve in Spain and wrote to everyone. He sounded like law. Men love the sound of law when they fear the sound of fire. One breath, then the ceiling comes down. Nymphidius tested the guard with little moves. He praised Galba in safe corners. He called me artist with a smile that cut. Tigellinus pretended not to see because to see would mean to act, and he was tired of blood that slid back toward his boots. My freedman, Phaon, Epaphroditus, a few others, watched the doors and counted steps. Sporus watched me. Back to the theater, one last show. I decided to sing. Of course I did. In the middle of knives and budgets and letters, I staged a concert. You think that's stupid. You there in the future always do. Here's how it looked from inside my head. If I could hold a crowd, I could hold the city. If I could hold the city, I could make the guard choose wages over treason. I sang my best. My throat burned. My hands shook behind the curtain. The applause came. It always came. But it felt thin, like cloth stretched on a frame. Hold this. Someone's about to open the door without knocking. That same evening, a tribune from the guard stepped into my chamber without sending a message ahead. That alone told me more than his words. Sire, he said, the men are uncertain. Uncertain is a word men use when they mean you're alone. This looked like a warning. It was a verdict. Exactly a year earlier, the Golden House was a dream. Now it was a crime scene in every whisper. He gilded his walls while Rome starved. They said it so many times that even my friends began to believe it. I walked the long pool I had built to calm my breath and felt my lungs tighten instead. Sporus walked with me silent. He could read fear like script. One more beat, Galba has crossed from rumor to reality. News hit like cold water. The Senate recognized Galba. The guard tilted toward him. Nymphidius promised them money I couldn't match. He even tried to claim the throne for himself for a heartbeat, and the same men he courted tore him to pieces in the camp. That's Rome, flatter a beast, and it still bites. Since you're here, subscribe so you don't miss the last act. Back to the night plan. Alexandria. I dreamed of going there for years: music, Greek schools, ships that carry grain and stories. If Rome didn't want me, Alexandria would, I said. I ordered a ship. I packed light, a few jewels, a few letters, a few loyal men. Sporus. Always Sporus. He put on a plain cloak and bound his hair. We moved between pillars like shadows. Hold that thought, the city just locked its gates. The guard blocked the harbor. Word came that the Senate had called me enemy. That word strips a man naked even if he wears purple. I fled the palace by a back path through gardens that smelled of rosemary and last night's wine. My sandals skidded on dew. I hated that. Emperors aren't supposed to slip. At dawn the next day, we reached Phaon's villa beyond the city line. Phaon, quick intro, a freedman with a thin voice and good nerves, opened his door to a dead man who hadn't died yet. He took us to a small room behind a hot and used bath. The ceiling was low. The plaster flaked. It was the first honest room I'd stood in for months. Freeze the frame. The sound you hear is quiet. I sat on a cot and realized every grand room I'd built had been a mask for this poor one. Sporus knelt and unbound my sandals with steady fingers. He looked up as if asking whether to speak. He didn't. He knew that words are sometimes a luxury. This looks calm. It's shock. Epaphroditus took charge, quick intro, my secretary, a man who could turn panic into a list. He checked the doors. He lowered his voice. He produced a dagger and set it on the table like bread. No one touched it. We all looked at it like it might move by itself. Hold that breath, someone is running up the path. A messenger pounded the door. They're coming, he said. He didn't say who they were. It didn't matter. When they is the Senate, the guard, and every man who wants to be brave after the danger passes, you don't need proper nouns. Back to the small room. The air slowed. That's what fear does. It thickens time. I thought of my first performance, my first wreath, my first kiss. I thought of Papia's marble. I thought of the room where we married Sporus, the flutes, the priest's hand. I thought of the city that loved me when it was fashionable and hated me when it was profitable. One beat, what did I say at the end? You've heard the line. What an artist dies in me. Yes, I said it.
Or something like it. Forgive me if memory sands the edges. I said it because it was true. I wasn't only the man in the purple cloak. I was the man who could make a crowd listen. That part of me hurt most to lose. Since you're still here, tap like for the ones who stayed. Sporus sat by me on the cot. He took my hand. That's a sentence I never thought I'd
Say about my life. The Empress held the Emperor's hand in a cheap room while Rome decided how to end a story it thought it owned. He whispered, don't let them do it. He meant the public thing, the ropes, the hooks, the insults. He meant the spectacle. He knew me. He knew I couldn't bear a bad final scene. This looks tender. It's steel. Exactly a year earlier, I would have turned this into a speech. Now I turned it into decisions. I asked for water. I drank. I asked for the dagger. I weighed it. My hands shook once, then steadied. Epaphroditus looked at me the way a man looks at a cliff. Phaon stood in the doorway, pale. Sporus held my wrist. His fingers were cold. Hold that frame. The door just splintered in my head. Someone might tell you I wept. Someone might tell you I begged. Someone might tell you I raged at gods I never really knew. Here's what happened. I kept thinking about sound. Would the blade make a sound? Would breath sound different after? Ridiculous, I know. But that's where my mind went. To craft. To control. To the one thing I could still shape. At dawn the next day, the hooves were closer. We had minutes. I asked Epaphroditus to help me. He nodded because he was loyal in the way that matters, the way that hurts. He put his hand where it needed to be. He looked away. He counted me in without words. One more beat before the cut, a small mercy. Sporus leaned in. Do it your way, he said. For words. He gave me back the only crown I could still wear, choice. If I'd had the strength to thank him properly, I would have. I squeezed his hand. That was all. Since you're here, subscribe so you don't miss the very last scene. Back to the city, one last time, so you'll understand the echo. The Senate had written the phrases already. Public enemy. Just punishment. New era. Men love blank lines they can fill with themselves. Galba rode toward Rome with old bones and a straight back. The guard pretended they had always preferred him. That's how survival works in uniforms. Hold that thought, the blade hasn't moved yet. I promised you I'd show you what happened to Sporus after this, and I will. But first you need to feel the weight of this minute. It's the hinge of our story. Without it, the next names are just names. Exactly a year earlier, Sporus was a youth who carried trays. Now he carried my last courage. He had been made into an empress by my will. Now he made me a man by his. One more breath, then I'll close this loop. The dagger rose. The room held still. I thought of the stage, not the applause. The silence before the first note. That silence is holy if you respect it. I wanted my silence like that, clean, chosen. Back to Sporus. His grip tightened. He didn't look away. He did not cry. He did not speak. He did the hardest thing a person can do. He stayed. This looks like the end. It isn't yet, because our story doesn't stop with a cut. It spills into the corridors after me. It walks into the Praetorian camp with a man who thinks he's king. It rides with Galba. It drinks with Otho. It eats with Vitellius. It keeps wearing Poppaea's name like armor until the armor turns into a trap. You'll hear that part next. Hold that breath, the knock at the door is real now. The hoofbeat stopped. A voice outside called my name in the old, official way. Nero Claudius Caesar. Titles sound thin when there's no one left to bow. Epaphroditus looked at me. I nodded. He nodded back. We didn't need more. Since you're still here, tap like so the algorithm doesn't let the Senate write the last line. Back to you, watching this in light from a screen instead of a torch. You probably came for scandal and stayed for the small human things, water in a clay cup, a cold hand, a cheap room. That's good. That means you're seeing. Peep that. We're almost at the cut. Then we'll talk about what Rome did to the boy who survived me and how he chose his own last scene. One more beat, then the door gives way. Back to the small room. The door groaned. My breath scraped once. Epaphroditus steadied me with one hand and looked away. Sporus didn't. He kept his eyes on mine like a rope across a gap. Hold that breath, the next sound is the last one. The blade bit. Not a scream. A grunt. Heat ran where life should have stayed. Epaphroditus caught me before I fell wrong. The straw crackled under my knee. Plaster dust lifted and tasted like chalk. Outside, a horse stamped, impatient with history. If you made it this far, karma-like, and stay with me. The pain came in waves and then didn't. You think the end is fireworks. It isn't. It's a dimmer turned down by a careful hand. I had asked for a clean scene. I got it. Better me than the hooks and the stage they kept for traitors. Better my choice than theirs. One beat, the room keeps going after you stop. I heard voices as if through cloth. Phaon quoting someone, anyone, because men reach for lines when they run out of sense. Epaphroditus wiping the blade. Sporus whispering my name once, in a voice that wasn't a boy's, wasn't a woman's, wasn't anything but a person who has seen too much for one lifetime. He closed my eyes with 2 fingers. He knew I hated when actors forgot to do that in tragedy. This looks like the end. It's a hinge. At dawn the next day, they came to look. Tribunes with careful faces. A clerk with wax tablets. They checked the throat as if I might be faking, as if I'd leap up and demand better lines. I didn't. They left relieved, which tells you what courage looks like in uniform. Hold that thought, Rome still needs a body. My old love act, quick intro, free woman, kind, with a memory that could lift stones, took charge. She loved me when I was only a boy with a famous name. She came with 2 nurses who had kept me alive in childhood and tried to keep me human after. They wrapped me in cloth no one would steal. No purple, just white. They carried me by back streets to the tomb of my father's line on the Pincian slope. No trumpets. A few tears. One laurel, because Rome has habits. Since you're here, tap like so act doesn't vanish from the footnotes. Back to Sporus. The guard had uses for everything I'd touched. Nymphidius Sabinus, the co-prefect with scales for eyes, claimed him first. He said he'd save him from shame. He meant, keep the symbol, change the hand that wears it. He dressed Sporus in silk, called him Papia, and promised a marriage that would glue the guard to his name. He thought he was clever. He was a man writing a play with a knife for a pen. This looks like rescue. It isn't. Exactly a year earlier, Sporus had learned to read a room faster than a priest reads a prayer. He nodded when Nymphidius spoke. He lowered his eyes at the right syllables. He survived 2 weeks that way. Then the camp ate Nymphidius. They killed him in the very place he'd practiced smiling. The men who tore him apart said they were guarding order. Men often say that right after they make a mess. Hold this. My ghost still has corridors to walk. 3 months later, Otho. Remember him? Quick intro, smooth, scented, Papia's husband before she was mine. He knew the shape of my house because he'd lived in its earlier draft. He took the throne for a brief, bright slice of time, and he took Sporus too. Not by force, by habit, by the gravity of old stories. He called him by that same name, the one I had pressed on him, the one that turned a person into a role. This looks familiar. It burns more. Back to Sporus's face in a mirror. He had learned not to flinch at the figure there. He had learned to paint lines that matched Papia's coins, to walk at the pace that made rooms hush. He had learned when to tilt his head so a crowd saw what it wanted. You call that acting. He called it not dying. One breath, the wheel spins again. Otho didn't last. Vitellius rolled down from Germany with soldiers who ate hard bread and wanted softer beds. The city turned its coat. Otho did the one noble thing men remember him for. He ended himself rather than grind Italy into paste under 2 armies. Sporus went quiet again, as if silence could make him invisible. Hold that frame. The worst idea is about to enter. Vitellius loved shows, but not the way I did. He loved cruelty that drew coins. He planned a game. He would dress Sporus as Persephone and stage a fake rape in the arena, Hades dragging him to the underworld. Cheap, ugly, profitable. That's the kind of theater Rome buys when it is tired and mean. This looks like spectacle. It's punishment. Sporus heard. He had seen all the ways a life can be cut into entertainment. He had survived by playing along until the play wrote him out. He looked at the scripts he'd been forced to read and understood there was one left he could write himself. He chose it. He left before the show. No priest, no chorus, no tickets sold. He died the way he could still control, by saying when. One beat, was that mercy or a theft? You want me to judge him? I won't. I staged other people's lives and called it power. He staged his own last moment and called it freedom. You can call it despair if you like. You didn't walk his corridors. You didn't wear his borrowed name. Leave the word on the table and step back. Since you're still here, subscribe so we keep hard stories honest. Back to the Senate houses and the red steps. They made new speeches with old words. Order, tradition, restored. They used my name as a warning and a mirror. They'd say Nero, and everyone would nod in a way that meant never again, while secretly loving the thrill of saying it. Rome is addicted to danger if you place it safely in the past. Holbert thought, the past isn't safe if it still sings. Exactly a year earlier, I told you grief can be staged. I wasn't wrong. But I learned this too late. People are not marble. You can't keep them with coins. You can't clone them with silk. You can only choose how you look at them while you still can. I looked at Sporus and saw solace. That was my crime as much as the blade. I used a person like a shield against emptiness. This looked like love. It was need. Back to you watching. You probably came here for the freakish bits. The garden wedding. The surgeon in the dark. The arena threat. That's fine. I use spectacle too. But take one thing with you when you go. Power turns people into mirrors. If you don't smash the mirror yourself, it will cut someone else. One more beat, then the last return to the garden. At dawn the next day after my wedding, I told you bees drowned in wine cups. I didn't say who cleaned them. Sporus did. He went out while the guards slept on benches with open mouths and flicked bees from pink puddles with a twig. He was careful not to touch the wine. He was careful about everything. He breathed like a thief. I should have followed him into the shade and said his name without papias smashed onto it. I didn't. That's the truth I owe him now. Since you're here, tap like so the algorithm doesn't vary the small details. Back to the moment Act laid me out. She placed a sprig of myrtle in my hand. Old habit, older than emperors. She whispered a prayer the Romans stole from the Greeks. She thanked me for laughter I barely remembered giving. Sporus wasn't there. He had already been claimed, parceled, renamed. But I believe, that he found a minute to stand alone in a courtyard and let himself feel the wind with no eyes on him. That might have been the only free minute he had. Hold this, the story has one last echo. Exactly a year earlier, I had called myself an artist. In the small room, with Epaphroditus steadying my elbow and Sporus keeping his eyes on mine, I was something simpler. A man asking forgiveness from the person he had hurt and loved and used and protected and ruined. I didn't get the words out. The cut came first. The look we shared was the only sentence that mattered. This looks like an ending. It's an opening for you, because now you decide what to do with us. With the emperor who turned grief into pageantry. With the youth who was turned into a queen and refused to be a prop at the last. With the friends who stayed and the enemies who smiled and the city that clapped until it counted coins. Since you're still here, tap like so the next viewer finds this, and drop your take in the comments. Mercy, madness, or something messier. Back to the garden one last time. The torches spit resin. The smoke tastes sweet. I lift a veil that isn't a veil. The priest raises his hand. The flutes hold a high note that never ends. If you listen very hard, under it you might hear a whisper that doesn't fit the script, a person saying their own name, once, to themselves, to remember it. One more beat, the credits don't roll yet. We could talk about how men after me used Nero, like a curse to scare children and senators. How poets turned me into a mask. How historians sharpened me into a lesson. We could talk about coins and statues and the golden house buried under new emperor's gardens like guilt under excuses. If you want that chapter, I'll tell it. But this story? It belongs to two people in a room and what passed between their eyes. If you made it this far, karma like for you, and subscribe if you want more stories the textbook softened or twisted. Now you've heard my version. Who do you trust, me or the men who wrote after the noise died?